welcome to the 17th episode of the Formula E Zone podcast. I'm Jack George Maynor and we'll be discussing the first race weekend in Diriyah. Alongside me, as usual for the podcast, is Tobias Bloom from E-Formel D. You alright, buddy?
I'm alright, yeah. That was the most energetic opener into any podcast I've heard in a long time.
Well, the season is back.
It's back. FE is back, finally. Yay!
We've had 2 races, not even one. We've had 2 races.
So good. It's so good to have the best racing series on the planet back in their season.
But
how are you,
back?
by the way?
I'm very well, but to go through my question again, but is it back, Tobias? We got 50 days till the next race.
It is back. It is back. Let's just ignore these 8 months.
8 months, yeah. Imagine.
It feels like it. 8 weeks. Now it's only 7 weeks until the next race. But let's just ignore that. FE is back.
FE is back. But first, we have a massive announcement to make. Because we have our first Patreon. And his name, to give him a massive shout out, is Matthew Polanski. I just want to say a massive thank you for obviously donating some of your hard-earned cash to us. We really appreciate it. It makes all the effort, everything that we do worthwhile. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt.
So moving on to the race then, because we've got so much to discuss. So we're going to start, obviously, double header, 2 races. So we'll start with the first race, which took place on a Friday. And we'll just start with qualifying first. We had Sims on pole, Alexander Sims on pole. We had the Mercedes in second and third, and that was a surprise. What do you think about the Mercedes before we get onto Sims?
Oh, really surprised, yeah. And just generally by the pace of the 2 new teams. Mercedes, in air quotes, of course, the new team, because they've had a season's experience with HWA, but still, they were really, they were a lot quicker than I expected them to be. Good job. Good on them.
Yeah, I was really surprised. And the thing is that's really interesting for me is that Venturi backed them up because Mortara qualified P4. So, I'm very good at writing off Venturi as one of those teams. It's just a midfield team. They're not there to make up the numbers. They could spring a few surprises here and there, but you don't expect them to. So when you saw the Mercedes powertrain up there on the Friday, and you saw Venturi with Mortara in P4 backing that up, I think Mercedes might be onto not essentially a winner, but they might have a really strong powertrain and could have a really good chance this year.
Sure, yeah. It's still very early days. It's only 1 weekend, and it's not even a typical Formula E circuit. Diriyah is very atypical to the other circuits we see and the other tracks we see in Formula E usually, but still. Them being strong all weekend is a promising start for them, for all of the 4 cars. So both Works Mercedes as well as the Venturi cars, which are obviously, as you just pointed out, powered by Mercedes. They did a good job.
Yeah, they did, for sure. Then we're looking at Alexander Sims' pole, and obviously wasn't in Group 1, and we'll talk about the Group 1 scenario in a second. But for Alexander Sims, a man who was, wasn't even sure if he was going to be in the team going into this season, to go out there and to put it on pole, no matter what group you're in, really and truly. So he picked up those 3 points for qualifying on pole. But as I said, he was a man who we weren't expecting maybe to be on pole in this first race.
Well, he's been on pole before in New York, final race of last year. He is quick. But going into qualifying, I had no idea whatsoever about which car is best. So it wasn't a big surprise to me, but it wasn't unexpected as well, if that makes sense. I expected BMW to be right up there. And to be on pole, that's a good achievement for the first time out. And it brought him the lead in the championship, at least for 2 hours or so.
But what I wanted to talk about then, so the Group 1, because obviously we're talking there about Mercedes being second and third and Venturi being up there. We had Sam Bird in fifth, who, remembering now that he He was the man who qualified out of the group, qualifying from Group 2 fastest. And then we had Jerome D'Ambrosio doing a really solid job for Mahindra, actually, making it to the final Superpole. So obviously, then from your championship leaders, we had Verne not in there. He was down in 11th overall. Buemi 14th. Lucas Di Grassi down there in 19th. Antonio Felix da Costa in 21st. But, going into that Group 1 session that they were in, the track was incredibly dusty, probably one of the dustiest we've seen. So was it sort of expected, obviously, that they weren't going to be in Superpole, and it was just trying to get the best place they possibly could?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're right in the middle of the desert in Diriyah. We were supposed to see it last year, but it rained. Apparently it was worse than last year with all the rain, or this year with all the sand. Obviously, if there's just the tiniest bit of wind, it blows all the desert sand onto the circuit. And that really was the big talking point of Friday. We've seen it in practice, drivers losing their car and smashing into the wall. That happened in qualifying as well, if I'm not completely mistaken. I think
with
Muller and Collado lost their car on qualifying, just because they were off the ideal line by half a meter or something. Just a couple of feet off, and they ended in the wall because there was just no grip out there. And they were in qualifying Group 4, which apparently has the best grip of all groups. So just imagine how difficult it must have been for those in qualifying Group 1. But that led to a decently interesting grid. Sims on pole, and as you said, the quote-unquote favourites in the championship right at the back. Da Costa, P21, the other Techeetah of Verne in P11. That was promising, I would say.
It was a good qualifying lap, considering he was in Group 1.
Sure, yeah. But he started from the mid-pack.
What I wanted to talk to you about, actually, was the qualifying group. So Group 1, obviously they had the dirty track, but then there's only like 6 cars going out. So I know they're cleaning the line, but surely the line isn't going to be cleaned that much for Group 2. And then Sam Berg came in and set the fastest lap overall. So, and they're only doing 2 laps. And I know that's like, okay, fine. They do 2, maybe 3 laps with the out lap. Well, they tell a lie. They do the warm-up lap they do their out lap 1. They do the 200 kilowatt lap. Then they do their fast lap. So they do 4 laps. So 4 times 6 is 24. So I suppose 24 laps around the track might clean the track up quite well. But, did you expect, with Sandberg qualifying second in the second group and then setting the fastest time, do you think that the track conditions did change that dramatically from Group 1 to Group 2?
No, I don't think so, no. And if you take a look at all the other drivers of Group 2, Sam Bird was just the fastest of them all. I think next best was Andre Lotterer in P7. Who else was in Group 2? Daniel Abt, P15. Ollie Rowland, P8. Jerome D'Ambrosio, he was good. He made the Superpole cut and Superpole qualifying in P6. And then there was Pascal Wehrlein, who started from P13. So having Bird set the fastest lap in group qualifying, that was really impressive, because as you say, the grip just wasn't supposed to be there, but he still somehow found it. I think it was just a matter of Sam setting a really, really good lap, and not a matter of the track improving that much between Group 1 and Group 2.
Because I always find that interesting. We have it at some other tracks. Obviously, I think Saudi Arabia, like Punta del Este, when we used to go there, with the beach and the sand, getting on that. But most tracks, we still sometimes see the dirtiness and the track having to rubber in. And I think it just amazes me how much a difference the Group 1 qualifying system makes to the other groups. And I also found it funny because we interviewed them last year, and you had Lucas Di Grassi, Jean-Eric Verne, all at the end, this is what could you expect us to do? This is not a great qualifying system. It penalises us.
It's great. I love it.
But at the same time, they told us we want this to be changed. But then they said, we don't want it to be changed because it makes it entertaining. It's like, make up your mind. Do you want it to be entertaining, so you're forced to qualify at the back of the grid? But then my argument actually always has been is that qualifying because, you're not actually finding the fastest person on the track. You're just trying to make a mixed up grid just for through a really clever qualifying system. I have to give it to him to how they made it. It's potential mixed up grid. Or do you just, change the qualifying system completely, and to ensure that whoever is the fastest within that time limit is the fastest. But I have a feeling if we moved qualifying system to a system where more like Formula One, where you have more chances, and obviously I know Formula Ones wouldn't work because of how many cars would be on track, but it'd be quite interesting to watch. But I don't think it would work at places like Paris or Monaco. But anyway, they'd complain then as well. I don't think whatever qualifying system Formula E could come up with, I don't think the drivers will ever be happy with it.
Sure. And as long as it creates excitement, I'm there for it. Depends, of course, on what end of the stick you get. Is that the correct idiom? I don't know.
I think that's quite what end you get. So sometimes you get the good end. Yeah, I'm John-Eric Verne. I was in Group 1. I qualified in the top 6, like what you guys moaning about. Whereas then next week, John-Eric Verne's 20th. I hate this qualifying system.
Sure, yeah. We like it, and it brings entertainment with it. And so I think the current qualifying system is good. We might see it change in the future, but for now, I'm more than happy with it, because it brings so much excitement into qualifying.
It does work, and you don't know. You go, and because, as you said at the beginning, the most competitive championship in motorsport at the moment, you don't know who's going to be on pole, and so you're on your edge of the seat until that final super pole lap, because until then you don't know who's on pole.
And it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. The whole point of this qualifying system is to, scramble up the grid. It's not a side effect that drivers in Group 1 tend to qualify towards the back end of the grid. It's supposed to be like that. And that's the whole point of this 4-group qualifying system. And it's doing the job it's supposed to.
Right. I think... let's move on to the race now, because the race was just as interesting as qualifying. And it started off really well, started off really cleanly. I was ready for that first lap shunt, which never came. But, it started off really well. Sims sort of got away, started to dominate the proceedings and having the Mercedes behind. And Sims, to begin with, looked like he was in control.
And for the most part of the race, I think he only lost the lead. Spoiler alert, he lost the lead after 30 minutes. So he led for 2/3 of the race, and he looked really good. The only thing that didn't look too good was his energy management. I think in the end of the day, that really cost him any chance of the win or the podium finish. He had the pace, but he used too much energy on his way. But apart from that, he really looked good in the race.
He did. It was a shame really about the energy management, but as from what I get from BMW, they just ran the race too hard. I think they just got the numbers slightly wrong. I think they were going to do they thought the race would be 1 lap less than it would. So then that caused Sims really then to curtail his, once he started slowing down and the drivers behind him got close to him, it was just, I don't want to spoil it too quickly when we move on to the next bit, but, he sort of just fell down, and he ended up finishing the race in 8th. So after all that work in qualifying and having that strong 30-minute opening session part of the race, to then just fall to 8th feels like, it probably was disappointing. You could see it on Sims after the race that he was, quite disappointed at how that race got away from him. But I'm just going to talk about the race winner now, because I feel like, I know we're talking spoiler alerts, but come on, I'm pretty sure most people who are listening to this podcast know the race winner by now. So, Sam Bird. Now, remember, Sam Bird, he was the quickest driver in the group qualifying system, made a mistake on his qualifying lap, which is probably one of the main reasons why he was 5th, because of that error. What a race, because I think we saw attack mode used, and obviously he used attack mode plus overtaking, and turn 18, which was the first turn of the race where that chicane is. He loved that place. He was making some great overtaking maneuvers to get up into at least 3rd place, passing the Freeze and Mortara on the way. And then he took the attack mode early. And of the attack mode change, it was on the exit before turn 18, so coming up before the long straight last year, but this season it was on the outside of turn 19. which goes, remember when we were discussing, they really like that it works on the slow corners. And it did work because they lost like a second and a half doing it. But in that lap, which we haven't seen a lot of, Tobias, he actually gained the time back that he lost and more.
Yeah. He is the king of attack, or was the king of attack mode in Diriyah, wasn't he? Used it so well and did a nice strategic job. I really liked how he used and applied attack mode. And I really liked how he, made up ground with the extra 10 kilowatts. I think we really saw a big change in that. As opposed to last year, we had 225 kilowatts with the attack mode. Now it's 235. And these extra 10 kilowatts did make a world of difference, especially for Bird.
And it was noticeable on that back straight.
Yeah.
The speed they were going down, the back straight compared to those on the 200, was immense. Like, it was like having...
Absolutely.
It was... Pardon the pun. Well, I don't know if it's a pun, but it was like a mini DRS.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. It made a huge difference. And Sam, made the best of it. And although, to be fair, he also did race well without the attack mode.
For sure.
He took the lead with 10 minutes to spare off of Van Dorn without attack mode. Just a plain old good maneuver down the inside of turn 17. Fair and square without any attack mode help, any gimmicks, just better pace than Mercedes.
But what put him there was the attack mode, and we can actually use that he actually undercut, even though he didn't. Van Dorn hadn't actually used that attack mode, but he was in a position anyway where he was going to undercut Van Dorn or Sims if Van Dorn didn't do that late break down the inside, passing Sims, forcing him out wide, which then Bird followed through. But let's say that move never happened. Where Bird was, even if he stayed exactly where that was with Van Dorn and Sims, he was passing both of them into the attack mode once they had to take the attack mode zone anyway. So it was brilliant. It was just a really well-managed race. You know, he's smart, obviously. He's been in the series now, starting his 6th season with the same team. He knows Formula E now like the back of his hand, and he knows how to use all its little trump cards that it gives you. But I think that was the best race of attack mode, of how attack mode can be used. And yeah, I think you're 100% right. The extra 10 kilowatts an hour made a world of difference. If it will make a world of difference at other tracks, I'm not quite sure, because not all tracks have the beautiful long straight that Diriyah has. But it was just managed to perfection.
Yep. Textbook drive. This is how you're supposed to be doing Formula E.
Yeah, 100%. And you know, for me, for Virgin now, I suppose we could talk about it, but they did dominate. So they, fastest in both practice sessions. Then, Bird probably should have been on pole. And then he goes and dominates the race in the way he did to go from 5th to 1st. Like, that was a marker. I know it's the first race of the season and you don't like, it's still the first weekend, but I felt like that was a marker already.
Yeah. He did make a point, didn't he? We'll have to wait and see how the rest of the year pans out for him. Last year he made a point early in the year as well, and then remember Santiago, he won the race and took the lead off of Wehrlein. Well, did Wehrlein lead? I think he did.
Yes, he was.
In Santiago.
He was closing in on Pascal Wehrlein.
Yeah, that was an amazing race last year, and then he had so much bad luck, and that in the end cost him any chance of the championship. If he manages to keep this pace up and the performance up and has a bit more luck this year, Bird could again very well be in the thick of it in terms of the championship fight. But as I say, still far too early days. We still have 12 more races to go, and a lot can happen in those 12 races. But if Bird keeps up this performance and does the same weekend after weekend, the same he did last weekend, and repeats that and continues to repeat that, that was a championship-worthy drive in Diriyah.
But as I was just thinking, it just popped into my head that, he sort of did that last season, as we said, like in Santiago. And maybe Virgin, they have a really good car. Maybe they've got a good package like they possibly did have at the beginning of last season. But, and I'm going back to this Group 1 conundrum thing again in qualifying, because then we saw what happened in Diriyah, and that could easily happen again in Santiago, easily happen again in Mexico. Maybe not as much in Mexico, but moving on.
But Chile was dusty last year.
Yeah,
as well.
Chile was fairly dusty. But then if you start getting into Group 1 and you're in Group 1 consistently, then you're in the midfield. And you're fighting your way through. And then accidents, it's basically what happened to Sam Bird last season. He was in Group 1 quite early on. And he was, because of the way the points, he was still in Group 1 most of the way through the season, but the tracks weren't great. And, you know, he was starting to fall back and the others caught him up. And I think maybe Formula E, it's a really weird conundrum to put it, but it's about when you get to Group 1. Like it's like a building. Like you don't want to be there too soon because you can easily get caught and knocked back. But if you get it at the right time, which probably Verne did last season, he got into Group 1 and obviously he was in it, then he was out of it because of braces, so he was able to qualify a bit better to get the points. But obviously Verne did do some amazing drives I think he did get from Group 1 into Superpole in a few times last season. But I have a feeling that maybe if you're in Group 1 too often, then I reckon that could have a detrimental chance on your championship.
Sure, yeah. The ideal way of approaching a Formula E season is, I don't know, be in qualifying Group 2 for as long as you can, and then for the last 4 races or so, attack and then win every race and just find a way to deal with Group 1. But you just can't manage that, can you?
You can't, but
there's so much happening in the races, and you cannot drive strategically thinking about the next race because, I mean, you have to win. That's in every race, no matter where you are in qualifying for the next race, you try your best, and that's the way of going about things.
You have to, but if you were Sam Bird and you were maybe analysing your season last year and thinking where it went wrong, because those bad lucks, of course, were no fault of his own. He got hit in the midfield, but that was because he was in Group 1, and if you're in Group 1, that means you have to get the qualifying lap right. There's no room for error, which probably makes Group 1 that more amazing than any of the other groups, because there's so much pressure on it that, you know, if you get it wrong in Group 1 in qualifying, it could seriously affect how your championship goes, because, you know, you could be leading the championship by 15, 20 points, but you have a bad Group 1 and you're 21st, and then your rival manages to get P8, let's say, they're in Group 1 as well, imagine, but then goes on to finish second. Case 18, you can only go back to 11th, let's say, in the race. He's ahead of you in the championship through one race. I love it. But at the same time, it can really affect the championship.
Yep.
Am I reading too much into it?
I think so, yeah. But I mean, mathematically, you're right. And it's of course better to, as I just laid out. I mean, it's best if you kind of hold back for a large part of the season, but who would do that? Who would realistically hold back in a race? If you have an if you have either you finish in P8 or you finish in P4, you of course take P4. If that means you're starting in qualifying Group 1 next time out, you take P4, you take what's given to you, because you don't know what might happen next weekend. You might crash out in FP2, and then all your hopes of, even if you might be in qualifying Group 2, are pretty much gone. If you end up like Nico Muller, for example, he had a crash in FP2 on the Friday, and in qualifying on the Friday, and didn't make the start.
Yes.
Because of the repair still going on. And yeah, I mean, strategically thought, of course, you could hold back so that you're in a better qualifying group next time out, but realistically, no one would ever do that.
No, and I agree with you totally, but it's just, when you just think of the psychology of the sport and the makeup of the sport and how it goes, and maybe if you were to really go into detail of how it was won, I think, if you were to do something like that, then you'd have to say Group 1 might have had some impact on the championship. But we'll move on from that. We'll try and sum up the events of the first race, the key events that happened, and then we'll move on to the second race because the second race got juicy. But what I wanted to talk about was Jean-Eric Vergne. Now, he qualified 11th, which we all thought was amazing, and we probably thought that he would move forward in the race and get quite a lot of points. But before he ran into problems towards the end of the race, he was still in 11th. He hardly made any movement forward, and that surprised me for Jean-Eric Vergne.
Yeah, he did struggle with his car though, and retired halfway through the race with a damaged steering rack. I'm not sure how big of a role that played, as well as maybe not having the experience on the dusty track. But you're right, I'm not sure what was the reason behind his lack of pace. Towards the end of his bit short-lived race, it surely was the steering rack slowly giving up on life. And the team had to repair that overnight. In between Friday and Saturday, it took them until half 1 or 2 in the morning.
Yeah, breaking the
until
curfew.
Breaking the curfew in doing so. So it took them a long time to figure out what actually happened with the steering rack. And I'm sure that played some role in his lack of pace on Friday. But generally, the Techeetahs didn't look too great on Friday. Also, Antonio Felix da Costa. Of course, new team, new car, new environment, new surroundings. You will have to learn how to deal with all the new stuff that's going to be waiting for you if you join a new team. But he ended the race in P14, which is, of course, less than he expected. In fairness, though, he started the race from P21 and ended in P14, so he did make up some ground. But yeah, as you say, Techeetah wasn't having the best of times on Friday. Having said that, Felix da Costa topped group qualifying on Saturday. So it might have been something, some setup thing maybe. Audi struggled with their setup on Friday as well. Something might have been the reason behind their lack of pace on Friday. Might have been the steering rack, might have been a setup. I have no idea. But race day on Friday certainly didn't go to plan for DS Techeetah.
No, not at all. The only other thing I wanted to mention was Audi. As I said, they scared me. I remember when I was talking to you about pre-season testing, and I was like, they're only 16th and 17th fastest, and then they don't look anywhere like scoring points on the first race. I was like, man, have Audi seriously got this wrong? Even with their own, were we looking at another Techeetah Renault situation where, Virgin, the customer team, banging it out with their, powertrain and the software, but the main team struggling, but it was good that for Audi, even despite not scoring on the Friday race, they did get their act together for Saturday. So let's go straight into Saturday. So Saturday, completely new, different race. As you said, Antonio Felix da Costa, he ended group qualifying fastest, and that, more like it from Techeetah. And it was a great lap. He ended up, 3 tenths clear of Buemi. So obviously came from qualifying group 3. So like the first person, so he was qualifying group 3, Buemi qualifying group 4, D'Ambrosio was 3rd from group qualifying, he came from the second group, Sims from the second group in 4th, Lucas Di Grassi in the second group in 5th, and Miss Edge in the third group, and Mitch Evans in the second group, and Sam Bird was the leader of the group 1s in 7th. But it wasn't Antonio Felix da Costa who got pole. It was Alexander Sims getting back-to-back poles and setting a new record of getting 3 consecutive poles in a row. I bet you weren't expecting that, Tobias. We've never seen it before, so you couldn't expect it.
Yeah, I could have expected it. Good job. I mean, Alex Sims he's the new star on the horizon for FE, isn't he? 31 years old, from London.
In his prime.
In his prime, taking 3 poles in a row. Good job.
That's a good achievement.
Yeah, and also there's no way not to like him. He's one of the most likable guys on the grid. I don't know any person who dislikes him. Yeah,
because he's so dry,
best, isn't he? Yeah, he's
just so cutthroat. He's just a guy that says it as it is. Like, there's no mucking about when you talk to Alexander Sims. He will just tell you sometimes he'll keep some things in reserve, but he's not got a poker face. I don't think. Maybe he does have a poker face, but so far when you talk to him, I don't know about you and you've spoken to him, he doesn't look like he doesn't look like he has a poker face because he does wear his heart on his sleeve.
He's the Jurgen Klopp of Formula E, the normal one.
Extremely
competent.
I'll tell you what, I think when we finally get to a race this season, if we compare him to Jurgen Klopp, maybe get a picture. See what he says. I think that would be hilarious. I think we'll have to film that.
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
But yeah, he's the normal one. He's likable and he's super good at what he does.
The thing is, though, we're gonna have to tell him to get better teeth. We're gonna have to tell him to get better teeth because Jurgen Klopp's teeth that matches the smile.
But are Alex's teeth that bad?
No, not at all. But
I've never looked at it.
Is it Jurgen Klopp's?
It's hard to beat Jurgen Klopp's teeth.
I love this tangent. But then Super, obviously Sims on pole, but Sebastian Buemi doing a great job in that Nissan to get P2. Lucas Di Grassi righting the wrongs from the previous race on Friday to be third. Jerome D'Ambrosio sticking it again with Mahindra in P4. Antonio Felix da Costa P5. And Mitch Evans in P6. And I don't have him down as setting a actual lap time.
Mitch Evans?
Yeah.
He was disqualified after qualifying for an underweight car. So he did set a lap time, but was disqualified.
Yeah.
From Super Pole, by the way. So not disqualified from qualifying, but lost his Super Pole time.
But I think from there, what I was interested in, obviously, Audi getting back on their feet, but Jerome D'Ambrosio, P4, Mahindra, like the silent assassin.
Yeah.
Because you're not... I keep writing Mahindra off, and it's really wrong for me to do so, but I feel like with obviously Porsche and Mercedes coming in, and how strong they have been so far in this opening weekend, I worried for Mahindra. And, but Jerome D'Ambrosio is keeping them in there.
Yeah, but we didn't hear a thing from him all weekend, did we?
No, not at all. It just came out
where
of nowhere,
did he end
really.
the qualifier? The group practice. Yeah, it's pretty much group practice. What a word. Pascal Wehrlein 5th in the Mahindra on Saturday. That was decent, but D'Ambrosio P11 in FP3. Let me check the times for FP1 and FP2.
In qualifying. So Wehrlein really struggled. It was an unlike Wehrlein weekend. It just nothing seemed to go right. It was pretty much nearly mirroring his first weekend in Formula E, where it just didn't seem to go right, and it just didn't seem to go right for him here. While you look at that, then obviously Sam Bird was 7th. We had Mortara 8th. Maxi Gunther. So that was interesting. The star of testing, Maxi Gunther, didn't really play a feature much in qualifying. Only in P9, and then Andre Lotter again for Porsche, running out top 10, and Verne in 11th. But Verne had a penalty, which will because he had to change a battery because of a crash that he had in practice 3. So they gave him a 20-second time penalty and a 10-second stop-go penalty. But Tobias, why did they take the 10-second stop-go penalty?
Yeah, I mean, it was a 10-second time penalty initially, so he was given the typical Formula E penalty. You just add up 10 seconds to his race time. But the team elected to go for a 10-second stop-and-go penalty, which didn't lose him 10 seconds, but 34 seconds. And you would think, why would they do that? Because, I mean, you lose far more time than you should be. But the reason is pretty simple. They took the stop-and-go penalty, they turned the time penalty into a stop-and-go penalty, and took it early on in the race, and then played poker and waited until the safety car came out, which did come out in the end. So he made up all the time he lost, all the 34 seconds he lost in the pits. He made that up behind the safety car. And so he served his penalty, but was right in the mix. And then made up ground, then came out another safety car. We had the full course yellow part of the race on Saturday. And he ended the race in P8. Spoiler alert again, but ended the race in P8. And if we had added 10 seconds to his race time, he would have finished outside the points in, I think, 14th or 13th. So that pretty much gave him points. So they added unnecessarily, you might think, 24 more seconds, which is the time for drive-through through the pits. You would think unnecessarily to his race time, but in the end, it came out better for him because he finished in the points.
That's just smart.
Smart thinking, yeah.
It's just unbelievably smart because the safety car in Formula E comes out so often. So the chance of having a safety car. So yeah, it would have ruined his race. Imagine he was having a great race, and then the safety car comes out last 2 laps basically like it did. His race is ruined if he takes that 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Whereas he's taken that penalty of a 10-second stop go, and then he's able to fight at that last stage to try and get those overtaking moves in the latter stages of the race. It's incredible thinking by Tech Cheetah Squad. So let's just get into the race then. It was quite a lively race. It started really well. Sims again, leading the field away and getting a really strong gap. But Da Costa managed to get past Degrassi in the early stages, but going into attack mode. So this was sort of a problem, and this came out after this race. No problem going into it. Nothing emerged from the Friday race about the placement of attack mode, but as soon as Da Costa decides to not T-bone, but hit the back of Sebastian Buemi as he looked like he was about to enter, so he turned in a bit more, sharply, because he was taking a tighter angle to try and go into attack mode, and Antonio Felix Da Costa got that completely wrong, misanticipated it, and hit him and sent the Swiss driver running, which he did get a penalty for. But on social media, Da Costa was a bit, felt was a bit more of a racing incident, felt that the penalty was a bit harsh because he could never have guessed that he was going to go into attack mode. So, Tobias, how do you sum up the incident between Da Costa and Buemi?
Yeah, I think neither driver is to blame for the incident. It's the placement of the attack zone. It was another location compared to last year. We will have to add that. Last year it was on the or inside of turn 17, or just after turn 17. And that placement wasn't great either, because drivers had to turn sharp right after exiting the already sharp right-hand corner, and had to hence be a bit slower in the corner, and that led to all kinds of drama. And now the attack mode activation zone was placed in turn 19, but that wasn't great either, because drivers also had to take a different line in the corner before that, and that, in the end, or in my eyes, is the reason for the accident. If the attack mode activation zone had been placed elsewhere, Da Costa wouldn't have had to take a different line. Buemi wouldn't have had to take a different line. Da Costa wouldn't have hit him. Totally different outcome. But so, yeah, both came together. Of course, Felix Da Costa could have anticipated Buemi activating attack mode, because the Nissan took a different line, exiting and entering the corner, maybe. But that's all in the heat of battles on track, and that's easy to overlook. So I think the ones designing the track and putting the attack zone activation zone thing there wasn't the best decision. And that's what the drivers said in the driver briefing going into the Friday race even. So there were some complaints about the location of the attack zone, and why they complained, well, we saw that on Saturday. Drivers having to take a different line to activate attack mode, and that led to the drama surrounding Felix Da Costa and Buemi. To be fair, though, the way in which Buemi returned to the track wasn't great either.
Oh no, not at all.
That was one of the worst bit of driving and returning to the track I've seen in Formula E in a long time.
Basically Monza in Italy with Stroll and Vettel.
Yep, absolutely.
It just had the exact same feel, and you knew what was coming for Buemi. All that spinning down, going back to 14th, but back to 14th because he nearly took out 3 cars by returning to the track, because he just swerved in front of them as they were going through. It was how there was no crash there. And Oliver Rowland, his teammate, was nearly the car he collided with.
Yeah.
So, just mad. I don't understand. He should have just waited.
Yeah. But that's how race drivers are, right? I mean, they want to rejoin the race as quickly as possible. But you
does the
must
team have
do
to
that
play
in
a
a
part in
safe
that?
way.
Should
Sorry?
someone be in the radio saying, should the team play a part in that? Should someone be on the radio saying, sorry, look,
Yes.
Seb, you
Yes.
can't go yet. You've got him coming, you've got him coming, you've got a gap between, you might say you've got a gap between X and X of like, you've got it's now or never, try it, and you might get away with it. But there was no gap when he decided to pull out. They were basically coming around the corner and he was deciding, I'm going to spin my car around now.
Right
and
now,
they were already coming round full pelt.
I'm not sure if the team was on the radio or whether it wasn't. I don't think it would have made too much of a difference, because you saw by the body language of the car that Wemmer really wanted to rejoin as quickly as possible. Well, and he did, but it wasn't. Yeah, as I said, it was some of the worst and most unsafe driving I've seen in a long time in FE.
Yeah, for sure. I'd have to agree. But there was more carnage. Whereas race 1, there wasn't actually that much going on, apart from there was App's incident towards the end of the race, which brought out, I think it brought out a safety car.
Yeah, it was a safety car.
Yeah, for the App swing. So that was the only one. But we managed to first get our first safety car through this incident where Bird and Evans, they came together. But it looked like on the TV screens that they were always going to come together, because obviously there was a bit of a lock-up in front and the car sort of converged into the actual turn 1. So not turn 1, turn 18 where they got from the start line, actual turn 1, which is on the left going in from the exit of the pit lane. And obviously Bird and Evans, Bird tried to go around the outside, which then going into like 2 and 3 sort of converges and it gets tighter, and the 2 just touched. Okay, and Bird was sent out a little bit wide, and Evans, amazingly, which I was surprised by, got quite a bit of damage and had to retire from that race. But Evans was given the penalty. So before we move on to what happened next in the collision, what did you think of Evans' penalty there? Because to be honest with you, I thought that was slightly harsh. Because yes, Evans was there, Bird was sort of maybe a little bit ahead, but they were side by side. They probably would have been a bit blind in the mirrors. Bird probably didn't see Evans or thought he might have got actually like past Evans. So I thought that was a bit more 50-50.
Absolutely, yeah. Couldn't agree more. It was a prime example for a racing incident. Bird could have seen Evans and could have left him a bit more space. Evans could have pulled back a bit earlier and pulled out of the situation. Both didn't, and that's how it ended in tears. Classic racing incident.
But Evans managed to get a penalty for it, but it didn't really matter much because he was out of the race because there was too much damage to the car, because it was actually quite a little bit of a light contact. I don't think Evans hit the wall as such, but they both made it through the corner, but there was obviously contact side pod to side pod, which sent Bird out a bit wide, but he was able to catch it. Obviously, because speeds, they're all off throttle at that point, saving energy going into the left of turn 4 as they're going downhill.
Still finished ahead of Marchingwa.
Yeah.
Burn.
But then, surprisingly, Bird retired from the incident, but it wasn't the Evans incident. He was then catapulted, but
taken
either
out.
way, was hit from behind by Pascal Wehrlein, which then sent him straight into the wall while he was trying to recover things. And boom, safety car. What did you make of that incident?
Yeah. Also a racing incident. Wehrlein could have anticipated a slow car ahead. I'm not sure whether there were any white flags, but
or yellows maybe at that point, because he
was
going.
He saw that Bird was struggling, and it wasn't really necessary to overrush things maybe, and trying to overtake him as quickly as possible. But at the same time, Bird also didn't look into his mirrors and didn't see Wehrlein approaching. So yeah, Wehrlein is in part to blame. Maybe it's 51-49 kind of a Brexit decision. But maybe a bit more leaning towards Wehrlein being the one at fault there. But nothing. Yeah, it wasn't enough for a penalty.
Yeah, so that.
But same applies to Evans. That wasn't enough for a penalty either. I
Yeah.
think the 10 seconds were far too harsh.
Yeah, I agree. But that wasn't the only safety car. So obviously that safety car brought Verne right back into contention, as we mentioned earlier. But it wasn't long, though, until the next safety car came out, which was a bit of an odd one, with Robin Frijns making it a horrible day for Virgin Racing after the highs of winning on Friday. But he just lost it all by himself and hit the wall. That rare error.
Yep, similar incident to the qualifying crash with Calado and Muller. Off the ideal line, off the racing line, you get onto the dust, you lose the car, and end up smashing into the wall. As you say, odd one, especially so far into the race. He said after the E-Prix that it was just a driving error and his own making. Yeah, fair enough. It wasn't a great day for Virgin anyway.
After the highs of Friday, that's what Formula E does to you. It brings you straight back down to earth, and I'm pretty sure Virgin felt that on the Saturday. But obviously, safety cars then played a massive impact in the result of the race, involving the second BMW driver of Maxi Gunther, who doesn't like to be called Maxi Gunther, so I apologise and call him Max. So it was going back to the first incident now. So you're not allowed now to take attack mode under full course yellow and safety car, which we pleaded for last year, and they listened to us, Tobias. I don't know why we haven't got paid yet. And they can't do it. But what I didn't like, and I think this needs to be fixed as well, is as soon as the safety car goes in, that they all then took attack mode, because they hadn't actually overtaken the safety. They hadn't gone past the safety car line. So in my opinion, I didn't like that whole thing anyway, because in my opinion, they're still on the safety car conditions. Even though that's going in, you haven't gone past the safety car line yet, you shouldn't be taking attack mode. Like, I think that needs to be rectified, because then that's just as pointless, in my opinion, as doing it during the safety car period, because you can't overtake anyone. So it's just a free attack mode. You can't do that. That's my opinion. I don't know about yours. You can tell me yours in 2 seconds. But what that gave is Maxi Gunther and Nick de Vries decided, I don't want to take attack mode, and blatantly overtook about 2 or 3 drivers. Which then was technically overtaking under the safety car. So what do you think of this whole little thing that just happened?
Yeah, it was very confusing, wasn't it? And chaotic as well. The problem is we have the new rule disallowing attack mode activation under safety car or full course yellow conditions. We've talked about it plenty of times on the podcast. But the race went green when the drivers were at some farther up the start line, some further back, but the drivers were on the start line, so before the attack zone, and the safety car phase had officially ended, and so activating attack mode became a possibility for the drivers. 15 of them did so. However, as you said, overtaking still wasn't allowed, because the race leader then takes or has the job of dictating the pace. He controls the pace, and you are not allowed to overtake until you cross not even the safety car line. The finish line is the one that counts. So you have the race pretty much being green, and you have green conditions. You are allowed, hence, to activate attack mode, but you are not allowed to overtake. And that's what caused all this confusion, because drivers, and rightly so, activated attack mode because the race was green, but they also most of them didn't overtake. Antonio Felix da Costa, he knew the rules and briefly went past Alex Sims, but then let him pass again. 4 drivers, I think, didn't know the rules. Lotterer was a bit of a different story, because he overtook Pascal Wehrlein at the beginning of the safety car, because Wehrlein was slower. At the restart, I think De Vries, Ma overtook 4 cars in all of that.
What a legend!
Yeah, what a legend!
What a legend!
And then Gunther, of course, overtaking 2 cars, being De Grassi and Van Dorn. So yeah, a way to avoid all of this confusion in the future, of course, easiest solution: drivers learn the rules, or introduce a rule similar to what we have with DRS in F1, disallowing attack mode activation for a lap or 2 laps after the end of the safety car.
I think a lap is fine after the safety car. Once the safety car period, and once you've crossed that finish line, you can't activate attack mode.
Yeah.
On that, because it's pointless, because it's the same conundrum that we had last season.
Yeah.
Where 15 cars take the attack mode. You want to get rid of that. So you saw that, and straight away, like, red flags were in my head. You need to get rid of that because they need to do it on the next lap when there's a little bit of field spread.
Sure. Yeah.
And they're actually loser position.
I don't think the field spread is the issue there. The issue is the advantage of activating attack mode under safety car. Because you cannot lose a place, because you should be not allowed to be overtaken if you are on a safety car in focus yellow conditions. So the idea of the rule was to eradicate all the advantages you have with activating attack mode under safety car in focus yellow.
But it still gave them one more advantage that they could take, and and obviously that will only happen at tracks where the attack mode is after the safety car comes in. Because obviously when the safety car is still out on track. Yeah. And you're going past the attack mode, they shouldn't. Say if it says safety car in this lap, if it's at turn 4, for example, they're going to go past it. They shouldn't activate it on that lap. So it will only happen on, I think, tracks when the safety car is gone.
If we still had last year's attack mode, it wouldn't have been a possibility. Because drivers were past turn 17 by that point.
And the safety car was still out.
Yeah.
So... It's
I think we will see.
You know,
we will see the FIA acting on that. There needs to be a clarification on that
because it was just, I watched it and I was like, well, what's the point in that then? Like, rule wasted.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because it wasn't fit for purpose at that point. So yeah, but the only thing I wanted, Gunther then came home in second. So we'll wrap up the podium. Obviously, Gunther coming home in second. De Grassi was third. Mortara having a fabulous race to finish in he finished 5th on the road, but the Maxi Gunther coming home second. We saw Lotterer get a penalty as the line happened for his overtaking under the safety car, and everyone was like, well, it's clear as day Gunther did it, but there was no penalty till like 3 hours after the race.
Yep, that's annoying, isn't it? And even us poor people having to work in the FE environment, having to wait for the results, but it's even worse for the fans because you want to finish watching a race and know the result is the one you've just seen on screen, and you hate finding out that the result of the race you watched has changed 3 hours after the checkered flag. But that's how it is in Formula E. The races are very short. You'll have to keep that in mind. It's just 3/4 of an hour plus 1 lap. And it's difficult to find comprehensive solutions in that time span. But if it's a slam dunk like that, yeah.
That shouldn't take 3 hours. That should be within 2 laps. Oh, you've overtaken under. You should review that. That should come up as a review. And they go, yep, we've seen it. Yep. You only need one look at that. And you've broken the rule. So what were they looking at for 3 hours? That's what I want to know.
All the other incidents that happened.
Yeah, I know, but surely you get the ones that are clear as day. That, Gunther's one was a massive one because you're going to have a driver up on the podium who's going to get taken off the podium.
Yeah.
It was a bit like Lewis Hamilton's one. That's the only thing I think the FIA need to do something on is when there's a bit, and they did really well with Max Verstappen in America. So I'll give the FIA credit back in 2017 when Raikkonen replaced him with Raikkonen. They did that quick. So, the right man was on the podium. Yeah, they quickly looked at it and went, bam, okay, great. Whereas the Lewis Hamilton one, it was a bit 50-50, but look at it, make a decision, there now, drop whatever you're doing, make a decision, because put the right man on the podium. It would have been amazing to have seen Sainz on the podium in that race. But it's the same here. You've got a BMW 1-2, but you knew that BMW 1-2 was so in jeopardy. So if it's not right, get him off the podium, put Degrassi second, and get Van Dorn back on the podium for Mercedes, and you would have a double Mercedes podium, actually fans seeing it, in the race. I think when it involves something like the podium, like, I feel like they've got to be much quicker at making that decision, because then you know, I was waiting, phone, next 3 hours, kept checking it, okay, now it's come through, like, how time did the race finish? It was literally 3 hours. I think it was bang just after 3 o'clock local time in the UK. And the race, well, it's 2 hours then, to be fair, because the race would have finished at 12:45. So about, 2 hours and a bit. And it comes through. But you're like, we knew that.
Yeah,
so,
I think it was just a matter of the race direction having far too much to do in the last 15 minutes of the race. Because we've seen the race direction of FE acting as quickly as we want them to. I remember London Season 1, Race 2. Stefan Zaraz, or Season 2,
yes.
I think.
Where he crossed the line first. He was the winner technically.
That's
that race,
right.
But he hit to 0%. Imagine if Stefan Sarazan actually won that race with Venturi after the season they had, with missing it with Heitfeld.
Crazy.
But yeah, he did hit 0%. He did use too much usable energy, and then 30 seconds later, the penalty was applied.
And Sam Bird ended up on the top step of the podium.
Top step.
Yeah. So it is possible, but that race was less eventful, to put it carefully, than the Saturday race of Diriyah. I don't want to play advocate for the race director here. I hate waiting for the final results just as much as anyone else does. But I think it was just a matter of them having a lot to do and wanting to release all the results with all the penalties at once. Not at once.
So that was pretty much the race then. So then obviously top three was Sims. He got that win. Demanding. We don't really talk about Sims, but it was a commanding victory. And, to see Degrassi put the wrongs right to finish second, and Van Dorn again for Mercedes. So Mercedes now lead the team's championships as well, which I don't think... I know Formula E can be crazy, but I did not expect Mercedes to be leading the team championships after the first two races. I know it's still early days. But I wanted to move away from the race, and obviously the one thing, because we need to wrap up fairly soon, Saudi Arabia wants to become a night race, and I think from this race weekend, it has to become a night race, because with the Saudi Arabian, if you weren't aware, weekend happening on a Friday and a Saturday, that's why the first race was on a Friday rather than Saturday and Sunday. If it was a Saturday-Sunday doubleheader, it probably would work, but it won't be because, as I said, the weekend's Friday, Saturday. But when you've got the rest of the world not really following that weekend structure, you had a race bang at lunchtime in the UK, and just after lunchtime in Germany. In America, it's early morning. It was not the right time, especially on a day where everyone's going to work, people are leaving to work, to have a race on a Friday. So for me, next season, it must be a night race. So, I suppose if you make it a night race, then it will put it in the American audience, prime daytime on a Friday. But then at least I suppose you've got Europe. But I felt like for Formula E, for an opening race of the season, they were basically marginalising the American audience by making it so early to watch it live. And they were marginalising the European market because everyone's at work at that time. So I just don't think it was the right time of the day to hold the race. So I think they must make it a night race next season.
And it was pointless to have the race on Friday for the fans attending in Saudi because no one was there anyway.
Yeah, it did look empty. I was looking at the podium thinking this is normally filled with fans, and I couldn't see any fans. All I saw was photographers.
Yeah, that was a different story because they kind of they put up a fence for the team and another fence for for the fans. So it was pretty much like the team members were in a zoo or something, and fans were locked out. And
don't feed the team members.
Yeah, please don't feed the team members. Anyway, so the fans were kind of, I don't know, 20 meters away from the podium. And then also there weren't many of them. I saw Sam Smith, another Formula E journalist, tweet about him maybe seeing 700 fans. I wouldn't weigh that too much. It's just an estimate, but not many fans were in attendance. And so having the race on the Muslim weekend, which is Friday and Saturday, was pointless anyway. So if we are having a race on Friday next year again, why not make it a night race, is your argument? I kind of agree, as long as you can make it sustainable.
They are looking at ways to make a night race sustainable. They are looking, and Saudi Arabia they've always touted that they wanted a night race. And I think if they want a double header to start the season, and we're locked in to Saudi Arabia for another, we had a 10-year contract. So we've done 2 races. We've got 8 years left of Saudi Arabia. And to be fair, I know people are a bit hesitant about Saudi Arabia, but just looking at the track itself, I would like to visit it because I think that's an awesome Formula E track. Like, it's fast, it's flowing, it's got great overtaking moves at turn 18. There's a lot of action that happens there. I think it's a really good Formula E track.
Sure,
But yeah, I just felt, what's the point of having a great Formula E track where you can't show it off because no one can watch it because everyone's elsewhere occupied? Whereas at least if you make it a night race, you try and, at least then the American audience, like sort of we did, watched it in our lunch breaks. If you were a normal fan, you had the chance to watch it in your lunch break at least. At least that would give the American audience a chance to watch it in their lunch break. And then the European audience should be home by that time. So they'd be able to watch it in their home. So I think it makes much more sense for Saudi Arabia to become a night race. And then I just want to look forward to Santiago very quickly. Tobias, Rally Chile has been cancelled, okay? But according to reports, then that happened today. But according to reports, that's not going to affect the Chilean E-Prix. And obviously, we're not going to get too much into the politics of the situation, but riots are still happening, and obviously, freight will now be on its way to Santiago. Are Formula E playing this really fine? Are Formula E going to Chile because they don't want a gap to February between the next race? Is it like just a do or die situation? Could the Santiago E-Prix be cancelled if things carry on the way it is, like a week or 2 weeks in advance of the race? Like, I know it's a hard question to put onto you, but at the same time, like, it's still happening. We thought we would have heard news by Saudi Arabia, but we haven't. And everything else is being cancelled around it, but not the Formula E race.
Yeah, but we had a tennis match there last weekend with Roger Federer. So there are major events happening in Santiago. It's not like the city is still burning. And as I said in the previous episode, of course, if the country has more important things to deal with, then please do so. Having a Formula E race there is far less important than any democratic system, or not having a democratic system in place, or a socially unjust system in place. There are more important issues, is the thing I'm trying to say, than Formula E. The point of at the point of recording this right now, we are 100% on for Saudi, not for Saudi Arabia, for Santiago. So the teams have been given more assurances that the race will go ahead. There's no going back for the logistics department anyway. The cars are already on their way to Chile. So yeah, I don't think linking the WRC round in Chile to FE happening in Santiago is the right thing. because for the simple reason being, WSRC is supposed to take place in a totally different area of Chile. So yeah, we will have to wait and see. I don't have a crystal ball. Maybe things will escalate
I thought you did.
so quick. I wish I did.
That's why I ask you these questions.
Yeah, but maybe it is possible that things move very quickly, and that 2 weeks in advance we will see major demonstrations again and protests, and then Formula E will obviously have to scrap the race on short notice. Yeah, just wait and see. But at the point of this recording, the Chile race is on.
It is. I hope we get there for Formula E's sake, because it is a long gap, and then to extend that even further by another 4 weeks by making it 12-week gap between Saudi Arabia finishing and Mexico starting. So, and obviously I think both of us want a nice, sort of a peaceful end to the protests.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
in Chile, and obviously for the people to get what they want and to feel like they're not being undervalued in any way. But I think that's a perfect time to wrap up this episode. Thank you so much, Tobias, for coming on. Really
thanks for
appreciate
having
it, as
me.
always. If you're really enjoying these episodes, we massively appreciate a like, whether that's on any of the podcast platforms that you're listening to or on YouTube. Subscribe to either platform. It was great. Obviously, again, massive shout out to Matthew Polanski for becoming our first Patreon. We really appreciate that. If you'd like to join him, no obligation to, but if you'd like to join him, and you're more than welcome to visit the Patreon page. It'll be in the description in either any of the forms of the ways that you're listening to this podcast, and you can click on it and you can donate as much as you want, or you can help feed Dan, who's no longer here, so we're gonna have to change that description. You can buy me a watch. I think that's the $10, and I can't. No, it's pay $10 for Tobias to go on holiday during Formula E race, because he likes to do that. And then $2. I don't know what sort of watch I'm getting for $2. But
somewhat so that you're on time for the recordings. Remember?
That is true. But it might not be very good if I only get a $2 one and I have to get it from the marketplace in Rome or Paris, where I have to go for. Shout out to no dodgy market stores for watches. But thank you so much for listening, and we will see you, fingers crossed, hopefully, for another podcast in the new year, reviewing the Santiago E-Prix.
Happy New Year. Merry Christmas.
Indeed.
Bye-bye.